Today's reading is Revelation 27 through 21:5. When the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, in order to gather them for battle. They are as numerous as the sands of the sea. They marched up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city.
And fire came down from heaven and consumed them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Then I saw a great white throne, and the one who sat on it. The earth and the heaven fled from his presence, and no place was found for them.
And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Also another book was opened, the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works, as recorded in the books. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and all were judged according to what they had done.
Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more.
And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away."
And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true."
We are, this is about the second to last book, or part of Revelation that we are reading. We are almost finished with Revelation. We started this, I don't know if it's been that long ago, but I know I had bangs when we first started doing Revelation. So, and it was just bangs. That's how embarrassing it was. But I think we have this, and then we just have one more. And this is about God coming down, and the devil has been given kind of another release there. He's brought people. It says Gog and Magog on that, Gog and Magog. That is it refers to something in Ezekiel, but it's also another illustration that John is using in Revelation to describe powers that be. You might have heard Gog and Magog. That's what started the phrase Gog and oh Magog. And so that's what started that. So that's a little bit of history for all of you there. Mark it down. Not everything I say is true. So the part that really affects a lot of people on this is it talks about the judgment. We see that, okay, the devil's been given his release again and all that stuff, and God gives him the comeuppance and all that stuff, but then it talks about people being raised and all this stuff, and God, actually God, not an angel this time, not a representative, it's God sitting there and opens the book and judges people as they come. And a lot of us, I don't know about you, but whenever I hear about God's judgment, I immediately almost feel guilt from things that I've done in my life, or I feel like I'm not worthy, or things like that, because I have misinterpreted the term judgment for all these years. And we have, as a church, done a little bit of damage with this. The judgment part is one of our top 10 hits that we like to play a lot. You'll hear it at school dances and church functions. We love to say that God's going to judge you. And it's always, you ever notice that it's always judge you? The person that's saying it never says judge me, judge us. It's just God's going to judge you for that shirt. He's going to judge you for that shirt. Things like that, and all. It's just this horrendous imagery of God coming down and just being angry and all of this kind of stuff. Well, I want to give a little bit of a demonstration of what I think judgment truly is and how we've misinterpreted. And the only way that I can think about that is by bringing up garlic. And so you'll find out how this will all come together. When we first started this church, Allison, my wife, she's right there, not the purple-haired weirdo, the one next to her. She And I had first moved to Lincoln. I was serving in western Nebraska, and we had first moved there. And Allison is an amazing cook. We're both vegetarians, and she can just cook the most amazing, I don't know what they call it, Whole Foods or whatever. And we were in this apartment, and we had this little island between us, and she's cooking stuff, and she's cooking with garlic. And she brings the garlic thing, you know, the full thing. What is it? Clove. And she brings the clove, and then she cuts, you know, breaks it up and everything, and it brings these little tiny things, you know, these little pieces. Well, they're not really tiny. They're like this, you know. They look like the thing in the bowl here. They got the cloves. I thought the big thing was the clove. That's what? The bulb. I thought she said that's bull. So I'm used to being heckled here, and I just want to make it clear. Husbands have this way of, at least in our house, of making the wife feel really smart. You know, I'd say that's the service I provide. Every day I do something that makes my wife say, I'm smarter than that. And I was giving a little bit of sass. You know, we were kind of teasing back and forth as she's making this, and I see that she's got these little cloves in the thing there. And I said, hey, I'll give you $1 if you eat one of those. And she said no. Why? Because she's smart. But I wasn't finished yet, being dumb. I said, will you give me $1 if I eat one of those? She said no. Why? Because she's not an idiot. I am. To prove my point, even without the $1, I picked up one of these things, and I thought, you know, you could just swallow one of these like a pill. You don't have to chew on it or anything like that. And I swallowed this thing, and then I realized how important breathing was, because I couldn't do it anymore. And, you know, when you miss it, it's like an old friend. You know, you just think, gosh, I miss oxygen. I wonder what they're doing now. And so I was having this, moment, but because I'm an idiot, she's off cooking and, you know, doing all this kind of, she doesn't even know that I've done this. And I think I got to go to the other room and try to hack this thing up before I make, you know, more of a, because, you know, when you do something really stupid, the worst thing that you can have is witnesses. You know, you just want to, you know, it's like cats when they jump off, you know, and they hit themselves, they just go into a corner, you know. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and heal. And so I went into the restroom, and I'm trying to cough this garlic thing up. And the only thing, and I don't want to get too graphic here or anything like that, but the only thing that I can produce is foam. I'm coughing up foam. I can start to breathe just a little bit, but I'm feeling pretty weak and everything like that. And after a while, after hearing me, you know, hack up and noticing that our house is smelling more and more like garlic, Allison finally comes around and she says, "Are you all right? Did you eat that thing?" And I said, "Well, you know, just give me a second here." And she said, "I think we need to go to the hospital because you're not, you know, doing this." And I fought it for a while, and I tried to continue to, my choice. I continued to try to, cough this thing up and everything. Finally, we get into her van, and I'm feeling at this point, we're on the way, and I'm feeling like this is bad. You know, I'm bad. I'm gonna die in a minivan. What's more pathetic than that? You know. She's driving. I've got my head out the window like a spaniel, you know, just, you know, hacking and stuff like that. Cars are noticeably keeping like 1 car length distance behind us. I think not just because of what I was coughing up, but because of the smell. I mean, you could hear people pass by going, "Is there an Italian restaurant nearby here?" And so we finally get to the hospital in the emergency room, and they say, "What happened?" And my wife said, "I'm afraid we have a severe case of moron." And so tells them what happened, and they said, "Can you still talk and breathe?" And I barely said yes. And they said, "Okay, well, we've got some ahead of you." And so I'm like, "Oh, great." And so I went out to the parking lot and continued to just hack this thing up and all this kind of stuff, and nothing's happening. It's just white foam, and I'm having a hard time breathing. And it was at this time that I started to maybe question my motives and actions, and think, that's how it takes for, guys like me, is it takes, before we admit that we did something wrong, you're pretty much at death's door. And that's when you say, oh, well, maybe I did. Maybe that wasn't right, And it turned out, the next thing I know, we go in there, and they give me either a shot or something, because the next thing I know, it's about 2 a.m., and I'm being admitted into a hospital room. And they said, I just remember them saying, do you smoke? And I said, no. And they said, do you do any kind of alcohol or drugs? And I said, just heroin. And my wife said, don't say that, they're writing that down. And so even then, I was trying to be sarcastic, and I'm an idiot. So that's exactly the way that and she was, and so Allison gave him the rest, and then what happened as a little stupid thing led to 5 days in the hospital. What had happened is that, I don't know if you can see it, but those little garlic things have a little bit of a hook thing to them, and it just so happened that that hook cut a hole in my esophagus. And so I was coughing up things that were not supposed to be part of my esophagus. And they told Allison that they were taking a look at it and they may have to life flight me to Omaha and cut open my chest and actually solve this thing. So Allison is torn because, one, she's thinking, oh my God, this is serious, and oh my God, I'm married a moron. And so she's conflicted, with all of that. But she's having a hard time with it. I'm kind of out of it. And it turned out that they decided that I was going to spend 5 days there, and I could not eat anything or drink anything for those 5 days. They had IV and all things like that, And the whole time I'm there, it was about the healing of this hole. And if they could get it to heal on its own, then I could go home. And eventually I did go home, but even after that, there was about a month of very strict dietary restrictions and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was a stupid thing that I did. It was a dumb mistake that I did. I was feeling the results of my own actions in this, but the amazing thing is that when we got to that hospital, they looked at me, and medical people are amazing. They make a judgment. And the first thing that they asked was, what did you do? And then immediately, once I told them, they started to judge what they could do to get that out of there and to heal what was going on. To them, it wasn't about, well, you've done this to yourself out in the parking lot, you go, cough and hack as much as you want, just stay off the grass. It was about, we have a problem here, we're going to solve this, and that's what they did. They went to action. They started to confide with each other and all that kind of stuff. And during this time that I'm in the hospital, there were nurses. If you're ever in the hospital and you really want to know what's going on, forget the doctor. The nurse, they know more about what's going on than anybody else. And if you don't have a chance to talk to them, talk to the person that cleans your room, because they too know about what's going on. The doctor, but everybody was, doing everything that they can to heal this. The church that we had just started, we had about maybe 12 people at the time, was kind of put on hold for this 5 days, and even during the time that I was recovering. The people that were part of this in the early days of this church, they gathered round and they were in prayer, and they even collected some money and gave it to Allison so that she could just buy her meals, because she was spending most of her days at the hospital. And they just collected a fund. One of them said that they were also collecting money that she could go on Tinder and find another husband that was smarter, but they're no longer part of this church. So it was all about judging what had happened to me and healing. And there were times that I had to retell this story because I had people that came in. There were doctors and nurses from other wards. Do we call them wards? That said, I just got to meet this guy because this is all over the hospital now. And they asked me, tell me what you did because I don't believe it. And we even had two doctors. There was a husband and wife that were arguing over the size of the clove, and they wanted to settle a bet, But during these times, I met the most wonderful people, and I had the most wonderful experience with the daytime staff, the nighttime nurses that would come in. They always had to, check everything like that. They wait until you're asleep. It's kind of like the waiter when your food, when your mouth is full, then they ask you how things are. They have to come in when you're just in twilight, and wake you up. But I had the most wonderful conversations, and none of them condemned me for what I did. All of them showed compassion. And most of them actually even said, it's rough what you're going through, not being able to eat or drink for 5 days. And we feel for you. I had nurses that prayed with me. They found out that I was a pastor, and they immediately said, well, I'm not going to his church. But they prayed with me, and it was very compassionate. Now, the question I have is when we think of God's judgment, why don't we think of that? You see, the thing that we miss the most when we talk about this little section here is we see God opening this book and the judgment and all this kind of stuff, and we immediately put God into this, robe and the hammer thing and all this kind of stuff and just condemning people and angry and all of this kind of stuff. We totally miss the next part that says God now dwells with his people and wipes every tear. This is not about an angel. This is not about any being. This is God personally wiping away every tear. When I think of those two stories together, what I think about is a different picture than what I was raised to think. I see the throne more as a chair. Nothing really, really fancy. Nothing high up, but a chair. And I see God with each one of us. Imagine this. This is the creator of all things, now dwelling with us and calling every one of us individually and saying, tell me about your life. What were some of the things that maybe you made some mistakes? Or what were some of the things in your life that caused you pain? Maybe something that you didn't even have any control over, but caused you pain. And like that physician, not judging or condemning, but actually saying, tell me about this so that we can heal it. Let's look at the evil that has been around this world. Let's look at the things that have affected you. Whether that was your choice, whether it was a choice of somebody else. But let's heal this together. Let's look at this. The doctors had to ask me what it was that I did so that they could eliminate the pain. That's their business. And the being that created those doctors will one day sit with me and say, tell me about the times you felt pain, because I want to heal that. I don't know why we don't think of judgment that way. Why we think of judgment as something, as a condemnation, when it's about a reconciliation. It's about God sitting with each individual. It's one of my favorite verses, wiping every tear. Wiping every tear. I hope we can think about judgment in a different way now. And I hope that we think about how we judge each other in a similar way. Because if God's judgment is to sit with somebody and say, tell me your pain, and work toward healing and relief, shouldn't that be the same way that we judge other people? Am I supposed to look at my neighbor and condemn them? Or am I supposed to look at my neighbor as somebody that I can walk with through good times and bad times? And that maybe as a community, a church community, we can help each other heal and find the problem. Can I share just a personal opinion too? And I don't know if this will get me into... Every week I watch the news twice. I watch it on Mondays and I watch it on Fridays. I watch the PBS NewsHour. I'm not trying to make a plug. That's just, it's what I watch. And last Friday, I watched a story about families, mainly children, starving. And they interviewed this, I think it was a 12-year-old girl. She had lost her sight because of an explosion. And she had I think it was an 8-year-old sister who had some sort of metal bar. I think it was on her arm or on her leg, I can't remember, but because of an explosion. And both of them had lost their parents and their siblings. They were being cared for by a grandmother in a blown out, what maybe once was a house. And they were starving. The blind one was being led by the one that was healing. And they were just trying to look for food. Those kids are raised in a different faith community. But when I saw them, all I could think about was just how sad it was. How much I wanted to see those kids live a normal life. How much I wanted them to heal from their pain. Now, I have a lot of compassion, but I really believe that God has a lot more than even I do. I believe that the God that I follow is one that created compassion, created love. And so when I think about that judgment, I don't think of it as just one specific group of people that were raised in a certain way. I see a God that is about correction, reconciliation, and healing. I think about a God that loves. Who somebody is in this world is not for me to judge. It's for God to judge. And isn't it amazing when we think about God as having more compassion than we can possibly imagine? More love than we can possibly imagine. That's just my thought on that. But I hope we think about that when we look at our neighbor, whoever they are. I hope that we are in the game, like the first churches, in the game of compassion and love. Not to judge, to condemn, but to judge in a way of walking this world together. I hope that we can look at our neighbor, whatever side they're on, whatever country they're from, whatever faith they're from. I hope we can look at each other and say the best is yet to come. Would you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, help us to understand what judgment is. Help us to perhaps redefine the imagery that we have been raised on, or help us to understand that you are a God of compassion, a God of love, a God that wants to dwell with us, that wants to wipe every tear. Help us to see that as a healing, and help us to do the same with our neighbor, with ourselves. Help us to share love with each other, with you, with ourselves. In Jesus' name, Lord, we pray. Amen. There's a lot of division going on in our world right now. You pick a subject and we seem divided on it. I remember growing up, it seemed like the only thing that we were divided against was sports. You know, you just hated the other team until the end of the game, and then you shook hands at the end. I hope we can do that with other things. I hope we can just watch more sports and maybe take a break from all of the other stuff. I hope that in many ways we can just lighten up a little bit and see our neighbor not as a threat, but as a friend. I hope that we can judge the world in a compassionate and loving way. That's my hope for all of us today. Lighten up, enjoy each other, watch sports, and don't ever eat garlic whole.